We need to be good at sussing out.
You can do it from any point. Let's collaborate instead of compete.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Mentor Nation podcast. I'm your host, John Abbas, coming to you live from my home office just outside of Nashville, Tennessee, in a little quiet suburb called Franklin. Very excited for today because my guest is very special, as he has the first movie that he has written and starred in. Well, he starred in lots of movies and TV shows, but this is the first film that he's actually written, and this film airs on the Lifetime channel on December 17th, which if you're listening to this as it releases, it's just a day or two away. If this is your first time here, I want to welcome you, say thank you for being here, and just ask you to hit that subscribe button so that you get a notification every time I release a new episode. If mentorship is what you're after, this is the place to be, and I want to make sure you get a notification. Just incredible guests coming down the pipeline. So today I have the privilege of speaking with actor, writer, producer, Brent Bailey. Brent has been in a ton of TV shows, a ton of commercials, a ton of movies, and he's recently become a leading man while also venturing behind the scenes, doing work as writer-producer. Today, we talk about his unlikely journey into the entertainment industry, as well as his latest film called The Holiday Dating Guide. This film airs on the Lifetime channel on December 17th. He wrote and starred in the film, and it was really cool because I got to be there on set in Georgia while they were filming the entire movie, and I just so happened to have bartending experience from way back in the day, so I got to actually have a small part as an extra in the film as a bartender. So that was very exciting. But Brent is just an incredible human being who is as humble as he is talented. And I really think that listening to his journey will be just what you need, just that special dose of inspiration while you're out building your own dreams. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the interview. Brent, welcome to the podcast. I've been super excited about this interview for a while now, and man, it's a Friday night, and I just appreciate you being on. I'm glad to have you, and I'm excited to have a great conversation.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So to give the audience a little bit of backstory on how we met, really funny story, kind of. Brent is a very accomplished actor, writer, producer. He's been on shows that millions of people love, like Criminal Minds, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and a lot of movies as well. But crazy enough, I met you on a movie set. One of my previous podcast guests is a movie producer, and at the end of the episode, I was like, man, if you ever film a movie, I don't care like where it is. I'll drive out there. I just want to watch and see a film. And he called me and he's like, man, there's this awesome Christmas movie. And so I got out there and I brought the whole family, and the goal was just to watch. I'm considering a shift into like movie producing we can get into that later, but I got picked to be an extra, and I ended up being a bartender. The only thing is I had to turn around and ignore the stars as a bartender. So I didn't get to see you and the other star. But I got to hear you guys speak for about an hour and a half. And I just remember thinking, I'm like, dude, this dialogue is like fucking really good. I wonder who wrote this. And turns out you're the star and the writer, and you made this entire movie happen, man. So it was really, really cool. But so I had to reach out to you to be on the podcast. But when I started researching a little bit about your story, that's when I was like, man, this could be a really great interview, and this could impact a lot of people, because your kind of rise to where you are today is a little unconventional, man. So I'm excited to get into all that, but I just wanted to start, if you don't mind, by just telling everybody a little bit about your background, how you got into acting in the first place.
Like you said, it was very unconventional. I originally got my bachelor's in computers, and then I got my master's in business. And right as I was finishing up with my master's, I was working at a company like as a programmer, and just sitting in the cube for like 60 hours a week. And it wasn't the worst thing I've ever done. Like, I mean, there are worse jobs, but I was so detached from everybody, because you're in a cube, so it's not like you have people to talk to. You've got so much work to do. You're literally like just interacting with a computer for 60 or 70 hours a week, and it was just really unfulfilling. And so I I'd always been really curious about acting. One of my best friends, his name's Harley J. He had been acting and doing theater the entire time we were in high school, and he had gone to New York and he did Broadway, and then he was in LA. And I was like, you know what? Why not? Like, let's give this a shot. He was so gracious and let me just crash on his couch for the first 6 months. And I came to LA really with no experience at all. Signed up as an extra, actually, with a company called Central Casting in Los Angeles. And as soon as when I stepped on set for the very first time, I was like, this is so cool. And then I just dove in and I did a bunch of acting classes. I cold submitted to agencies. I wrote casting directors and said like, hey, listen, I'm a fan of this show. If you'd ever consider letting me audition, I'd be so grateful. Some of those people actually brought me in, and then I just kept plugging away. It's one of those businesses that it's hard. It doesn't happen overnight. I know very few people that can actually just make a living doing this. So I'm so fortunate. And I think it's like persistence and hard work and making sure you're always studying. A lot of it is literally like what you just said, who you know.
Right.
Because there's a lot of opportunities that don't even make it to these breakdowns where we go and look for roles or our agents go and look for roles. It just comes literally from a relationship that you have with somebody. And that's actually how the movie that you and I met got made. I was on another movie that Brian Herzlinger was exec producing. They needed a guy and they were like, Brent Bailey would be great. So he hired me for that movie with Jodie Sweetin. And then when I was on that set, I got to know the producers of it, Ann and Doug. And Ann was like, man, we don't have a movie for this summer. And I was like, I've got a movie. And then like within months, we were filming in Atlanta. Like they bought the script, they attached me, they brought Maria Menounos in. Then all of a sudden Lifetime had bought it. And now it's coming out this Christmas. So
so it's going to be this Christmas.
It's going to be, they bumped it up. Lifetime has watched the delays and they liked it so much that they bumped it to this Christmas. I'm not even sure if I'm a fish. Maybe I'll get in trouble.
I can delete it.
December 17th. It's going to be on Lifetime.
Wow. I just won't tag Lifetime on this.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, listen, Lifetime's been tagged on every post, so I think they're aware of it. I know the movie's almost completely done. Apparently, Lifetime got to watch a cut of it today, and they were very excited about it. They're so thrilled that they can move it up this year. So yeah, the way things work in this business is sometimes crazy.
That's awesome, man. I have so many questions from what you just said. So first off, you went to school for computer programming and you got a master's in business, and you're just like, nah. Like, were your parents pissed?
They were very mad because my parents they paid for my entire education, which I'm so lucky. But then when they were like, wait, you're just going to stop and you're going to be an actor? Like, no, absolutely not. But luckily my parents are also extremely supportive. So while they were concerned, they still, they've given me enough confidence and enough freedoms to make these kind of choices and do it without fear of them like disowning me. And now obviously they're thrilled. They get so excited every time I'm on TV or every time I do a movie. And I think they're grateful to see that I've been successful and not like financially living on the sidewalk.
Yeah. Big Bear house in LA. Yeah. That's yeah. And when I was in LA last week, oh my gosh, I can't believe what California is like.
It's a lot different than people think.
Yeah, it's crazy. So my next question is like, when you were like, you had a friend that was acting for a really long time. Like, did you ever like consider it in those early days, or did you ever like look in the mirror and just like, I could potentially be an actor? Or was it just like a no thought until you actually went out to the working world and were like, I hate this. Like, what else can I do?
I think it was, I had always been curious but I was a very shy and like nervous kid. I wasn't very cool. I didn't have a lot of friends. And so the thought of like getting up in front of a bunch of people, and I don't know, for whoever is watching this, like whenever you watch a movie, I don't think you realize how many people are actually just sitting there, sometimes just staring at you because they're not on camera. It's very nerve-wracking. And so I think the idea of that, even on some of my first auditions, like if I had to do something crazy, like if I was like getting, like if it was a horror movie, I remember there was this one where there was like a horror movie. I was supposed to be looking through a peephole, and then like the monster reaches through and like pulls my eye out, and I have to pretend like my eye is now missing and like roll around on the ground. And I was so terrified that I left. I was like, I'm not doing that. That's ridiculous. And so it took a while to like build that confidence. And it took basically an evolution in my entire personality to where I had to be okay making a fool out of myself and just embracing this weird business. And so I don't know that I ever really believed I could get to this point. And I think the true shift was when I was sitting there in that cube and I was just like, I went through a breakup.
Right.
I think I was having a little bit of like a quarter life crisis. I had already bought my first house when I was 19. And so I was like pretty well established and like set on a path for a pretty great life. I just knew I wasn't super happy. And it was really hard to leave my family. Like my parents were obviously devastated when I drove off to California, and my sister, and she's got a kid, well, 2 kids. And so not being around to watch them grow up is always hard. But I think I just knew I wanted more, and I knew I wanted something different. So I just made that definitive choice, and then really, really, tried hard, and I got lucky that it worked out.
That's awesome. So I have to ask it, because you got a master's in business. Like, what made you choose acting rather than starting your own company at that time?
I mean, I don't think, like, every time I thought of an idea that I thought was really genius, I would then go onto Google and see what was over there, and like somebody else had already done it. I think the really fortunate part about the fact that I did get my master's in business is acting really is a business. We just oddly, like, I am the product, so I have to sell myself. It's been so beneficial when it comes to finances. A lot of times you come into large sums of money really quickly, and a lot of my friends have fallen into those traps where they then spend all that money and then you're back at square one again. Yeah. So it's good. I think the business degree and the computer degree, for the most part, everything's on computers now. Even like this, we're now doing interviews through whatever this platform is, and then all of my self tapes are now, like, I'm auditioning from home, and it's neither of those degrees I think got wasted, but it just was definitely not the path I think I thought I was going to go down, or my parents thought I was going to go down.
Yeah. It's kind of like starting a company, right? Sometimes you waste all this money and you struggle for years and years. And then the real like value of all of that money was just to show you that this is not what you're meant to do. And so it's like, it's never really a waste. And so, but I think it's so important what you're saying, because it's that decision. And, a lot of the people listening, I think, are kind of like me in a lot of ways. Like we all, like, a lot of people I know have a creative side to them, and they bottle it up, and they're afraid because they hit a certain age, or they have a kid, or they have too many responsibilities, or they're so set in their ways that they're just afraid to like make that decision that you made, which is why I really want to hone in on this, because you spent tons of money, tons of time, 8 years of your life in college. And then you're just like, like, this is not what I want to do. And you made a quick decision. So how long did it take you to where you were actually able to earn a full-time living as an actor?
Well, I was like, since I was a dork, I was very much an overachiever. So I actually, when I graduated from high school, I was already a sophomore in college. And then I did like 21 credits per semester. And I also went year round. So I graduated with my bachelor's in 2 years and my master's in 2 years. So I had my master's when I was right before I turned 22.
What?
Yeah, I was really like, I think it was like the one thing I was sure of was like, I knew I wanted to get my master's. I knew I wanted to get through school. And that's what I think the like crisis came in at the end of that, because then I accomplished it and I was done. And then I had one of those moments that I think we all kind of have eventually, where I was like, oh gosh, what's next? I worked so hard to get to this place. So luckily I didn't have a whole lot of things that were like, I didn't have kids yet. I wasn't married. I didn't have a lot of financial responsibilities. So, because I was only 22 years old when I moved to California, the first 5 years were definitely a struggle. Like, I remember people would say like, do you want to go do this? And I'd be like, I can't afford the gas. Like, I'm sleeping on a couch right now. After 6 months, I upgraded to the living room, or sorry, the dining room. And I put a bedroom in there with like those little dividers. But like when people come in, like I had 2 roommates, and when they would come in to make breakfast in the morning, I would like, it was on the other side of the bar. I would like smell the eggs that were being cooked. And I didn't actually get my first bedroom in Los Angeles for a year.
Wow.
And I was broke. And I think maybe not as broke as I believed in my own head, but I was just so focused on just not running out of money, that I would not spend it as much as I could. And then I worked at Blockbuster Video for 3 years. I was a manager over there. It was super flexible. Since I didn't know much about the entertainment business, I also didn't know about movies and television. So working at Blockbuster actually was so beneficial because I had like a library. It was like just research all day long. And then I started booking a bunch of commercials. I did like 7 Taco Bell commercials.
Oh, wow.
And then from there, it gave me like the financial freedom to just focus on acting. So I would say like 5 years in was when I could just focus on acting.
That's awesome. That's like really, 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 I love more than anything, just like reading stories of actors, directors, and producers that have crazy journeys, like Matthew McConaughey and his book Green Lights, or, there's just so many that it's just, it almost didn't happen for them if they didn't do this or that. Like, that's crazy. And I was listening to you in another interview, thought it was funny that you started catching a break and all these directors were like, yeah, just be like this movie. And you're like, shit, I haven't watched a lot of movies.
Yeah.
And go just catch up on a bunch of movies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had to catch up on a ton of movies. I had to learn a lot of people. I mean, I'm still pretty bad when it comes to names, but like I had to learn who a lot of people were because, there were a lot of times I'd be sitting there talking to like a director and I would just be, oblivious to what they had done prior. And so I think I probably put my foot in my mouth quite a few times. And I always do that thing in LA. Now it's just become sort of a joke because it's so common to walk up to somebody in Los Angeles, especially if you're at like a party with mutual friends, and be like, how do we know each other? And they'll be like, yeah, you look so familiar too. And then we'll both realize we have no idea who we are. We've just seen each other on TV before. And so we're like, all right, it's a good thing to have well-versed knowledge on the people that are working.
That's awesome. So
yeah.
I want to get into this in just a minute, because I know everybody that listens, like one of the things that my audience always asks for is like, especially when I interview anybody that's been in movies and on TV or producers, directors, just like, what's it like? What's it like this, that, what's a day in your life look like? And I want to get into like some of the routine stuff.
Sure.
But before I do, I just want to ask, like, what was like your big break? Was it the commercials? Like what was kind of the thing that now you're bankable?
Yeah, that's really tough to say because it's all like little building blocks. So as you get more recognizable, each little step, at least for my path, like I know some people that like they came out and like their first thing was so big that it like catapulted them. Like I think Emma Stone, when she did Superbad, then she just bumped to a whole new level. My very first thing was the Rascal Flatts music video, and I was so excited. And it obviously, like a lot of people saw it, I got a lot more attention. But then like for commercials, I think it's weird. It's one of those things where like they want to know that you've done commercials so you're not green because they're so expensive to make. They want to make sure they get done in a timely manner. So then from there, I think I just continued booking more commercials. The way I really got into the Christmas world was a director named Jake Helgren. Who's amazing. He does a ton of these Christmas movies and he writes them, he directs them, he produces them. He had seen me I had like a really small role in the movie called Think Like a Man.
Yeah.
I think it's based on the book. I think Steve Harvey did it, or I should know all of this, but it was so long ago. He saw me in like a small role in that. And then he saw me in a really small role in this movie called Going Down in La La Land. And so he just called and offered me this really small role of hunky Santa in Girlfriends of Christmas Past. And so I was like, listen, like, oh my gosh, this is so cool that I'm getting a straight offer. I think that was probably my first one at that point. But I was like, can I read the script? And so I read the script and I was like, listen, thank you. I'm so flattered. I will accept that role, but I really want to be Carter. And he was like, yeah, Carter's the lead. Like he's the romantic lead that Tammin Sursok falls in love with. I know you would rather have that role, but you can't have that one. And I was like, well, I'll do whatever it takes. I will audition. I was like, I don't expect you to give it to me. And he's like, all right, yeah, like audition. So I put myself on tape and then they gave me the role. Stephanie Slack saw it and Jake watched it. And then I somehow got approved for that. And then from that, apparently I got on this list that like, I guess Lifetime has and like Bar Vista uses. So it's like, these people are pre-approved. Now a lot of the movies I've been doing lately have been just straight offers because again, they already know like, all right, he'll show up, he'll do his job, he'll do a good job, and the movies will do well. So each little step, I think, changes it higher and higher. Once you've been on like a network show, I think it's easier to get in with the network because they're like, cool, we've already him, he's already approved. But I think there's obviously still more levels. I mean, once you get on a network series regular role, then it opens up a whole new category of things for you. And I haven't quite hit that one yet.
Oh, I bet. Funny story. So our 5-year-old, she's just so animated and talented. And so we wanted to have her do modeling. And so we took her to an agency here in Nashville, and the agent was like, well, we're always looking for blended families. Like, why don't you all just sign up? And so me and my wife, we get booked all the time, but nothing speaking. It's all just print, website, like stuff like that. And I just was so surprised at like how well it pays, because we're both super busy, but we'll get these like emails and they're just like, one day, $2,500 each. And we're like, that's $5,000 for a day. Done. I'll cancel all my shit. Let's go.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. So, and then another thing that I thought was really cool is that you started with Rascal Flatts. Like, one of his best friends is one of my best friends, Gary LaVox, the lead singer. Yeah. So one of my good buddies here owns Black Tie Moving here in Nashville, and it's just great. They own several businesses together and clothing lines. So it's just so funny, man. Small world.
It's a very small world. It's especially like when it comes to like Los Angeles is pretty tiny, but then when it comes to the people that are actually working in Los Angeles, it gets even smaller. It's crazy.
Yeah. So I want to ask a couple, because you said some things earlier that I think are really important for people listening. Because, man, acting, and I think everybody knows how hard it is to become successful in that industry. Like, the fact that you can make a full-time living is incredible, but it's not just because you look great. Like, you said some things earlier that are really important and that I want to point out. It's just your relentlessness in asking, networking, meeting people, and for being so shy when you were young. Like, did it take some getting used to? Like, did you have to force it? Did you like set goals and like discipline yourself? Like, what was that like?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, it was very hard at the beginning. It's still hard sometimes. I'm never the type of person, and I know some of these people, and I sort of admire it, but like, I'm never the type of person that can go to a party purely to network and like only talk to people to network. And I'm never friends with people just because I think they can better my life or my career.
Yep.
I don't have that ability. I think I've thrived and succeeded mostly because I developed genuine relationships with people that I truly enjoy, and they enjoy me. And then we just work together well so that they continue to ask me back. Jeremy Gordon became one of my really, really close friends because he's a casting director. We worked together on a few things, and then we became such good friends that now when there's a role out there that he thinks I'm right for, he knows he can call and say like, Brent will be great for this. And he doesn't have to worry about like me showing up to set like a disaster or like me being a jerk. He just knows I'm a good person.
Right.
And that goes a long way in this town. It's too hard. Like, I think you asked like what it's like on set, and a lot of it is like, I mean, we'll be on set for 14 to 16 hours a day. Like, you really got to like the people that you're surrounded with, and they've got to be nice, because otherwise that's a long day to be miserable with somebody that's not a friendly person, or that's a diva, or that is demanding. It just doesn't work very well. Right. But I think it took a long time for me to come out of my shell. I think sometimes I still get nervous. I think, we all at some level, some worse than other, have anxiety and social anxiety. And I think we all feel like frauds sometimes. So like, even at the beginning of the movie that I met you on, people would come up to me and be like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Like, you wrote this movie. And I'd be like, it's, I got lucky. Like, I always downplay it. I've never been one of those people that can like raise things up.
Yeah, I'm the same way. So I wanted to ask, like, in those early days, was there anything that you look back on now that you wish you had done a little more of, or done a little bit better, or did everything kind of like, now that you've made it to where you are, like, is there anything that you look back and you're like, man, if I could go back, I would have done this just a little bit more. I might have done that, like, in hindsight.
It's funny. I just had this conversation with my parents because we were talking about like looking back on your life and wishing you had done things differently. And it's such a dangerous thing, I think, to think of, because maybe I could have changed some of the things I did or gone about them in a different way, but then it would have changed in where I am now. And I'm really happy with where I am now.
That's
so
right.
I think all of the things I went through, whether they were mistakes or, heartbreaks, they developed who I am today. and are the reason I am here today. So I try not to dwell too much on like what would I have changed. I think I just try to focus on what I've learned and now what I'm going to change going forward. And I think you even asked, I made a lot of goals. I had like a wish board on the back screen of my desktop computer. I had like the cars I wanted, the house I wanted, the roles I wanted, like pictures of people on the Oscars or like red carpets. And then I had like a bulletin board and I'd be like, hey, this year I'm booking 5 co-stars, 5 commercials, and a guest star. And so every year I would try to set new goals. I've slacked on that a little bit lately, right, but I've gotten better at, I mean, we talked before this interview about like the law of attraction. And I really feel strongly that if you do want things to happen, you have to set intentions. And I do truly believe that, positive energy does bring back positivity, and negative energy, I think, brings negativity. So I always try to let go of the negative stuff and really try to focus on positive and like goals and things that I want to happen that are going to be good for me, and try not to worry too much about the bad stuff. Because if you're sitting there worrying that something terrible is going to happen, I think you're almost drawing that energy into yourself.
Yeah. I really love that outlook. Somebody asked me that actually one day, and I was just like, I always talk about how I wish I'd done movies earlier, and they're like, do you actually wish? And I'm like, well, no, because I have 3 kids that would have never happened. Everything would be different. And so it's like, you're absolutely right. Like, spend no time looking back at what you should have done and just keep moving forward, which brings me to moving forward. So you're not just an actor anymore. You're a writer, you're a producer. Like, what's kind of the next phase for you? Do you want to be a showrunner? Do you want to be a lead star of a series? Like, what's kind of like if you could do whatever you wished at this moment, like what would be that thing?
For the longest time, I used to always say I didn't want to book a series because it's so much work.
Yeah.
And I really like being able to come up to Big Bear and go fishing. And I like being able to go on motorcycle rides and camping with my friends. And once you get that show, especially if it's an hour-long procedural, you now live that life. And so for the longest time, I've kind of pushed it away. But I do think at this point, like, that's my next thing I want. I want to book a show. I don't know how long I'll do it for, but if I could book a great, preferably like a superhero show, I'd be thrilled. It would be really cool. As far as like the producing, writing was, luckily it wasn't super difficult. I'd read so many scripts and I've been in the business so long that I understood the formatting, and I had great guidance from people like Brian Herzlinger to help me through it. But it was more painful than I expected because everybody has their notes and everybody has like, hey, I know that this is what you like, but this doesn't work for what we're selling. So I had to let a lot of my babies die in that, which was really tough. And so I think going forward, what I've kind of transitioned to now is a lot of people started sending me scripts. A lot of friends started sending me scripts. And so I was like, great, I'll be the middleman. I'll read the script, and if I think it's good, I will now pass it on to the people with money with me attached and be like, hey, this is the movie I want to do next. Do you guys want to fund it? And I think that'll be easier because then I won't be so precious about it. And it won't hurt so much every time there's like a rewrite. And then I'll be like, oh, cool. That wasn't my script. That wasn't my story. Because a lot of this movie that you were in that I wrote was so personal. A lot of it was based on my parents' relationship, my relationship, like my friends. And
oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Like, it was originally called You Might Be Right. And that was something my parents told me that like made their marriage work. They would say, like, anytime we got in a fight, they would just be like, well, you might be right. And that's a hard thing to argue with. And at some point, the movie not only went from not being called You Might Be Right to there was no remainder of that in the entire script. And I called Brian and I was like, hey man, that's the one thing I'm putting my foot down. I was like, we have to say it. So there are 2 points in this movie where I say, you might be right. My dad says it, or I think I say it to my dad. And then I think Maria and I even say it toward the end. And the coolest part, like, I'm all about like serendipitous occasions or whatever the right way to say that is. But my parents' wedding anniversary is on December 17th, which is the air date of the movie. So I was like, man, that's like the stars are lining up. Like, this all was meant to happen. It's funny when you get on like a good path and on the right path, and then you see all these little coincidences that are too like perfect to just be coincidences.
Wow. So if they were to like offer you like the lead in like a Game of Thrones, the next prequel or would you say yes?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'd be crazy to say no.
Just making sure. Just making sure.
Yeah, I mean, I love doing rom-coms. I really would love if I could get like on a sitcom. Like if I had a buddy that was on Baby Daddy that was on ABC, that kind of show would be right up my alley. Like that would be awesome.
That is awesome. Yeah. So I was kind of wondering why you started writing and producing, because I was reading, like, me and my wife, we love Yellowstone, and I was reading this biography of Taylor Sheridan, and it's just crazy, man. He's actor and was doing his thing, and then some lawyer, big entertainment lawyer, told him he was a dime a dozen when he asked for a raise. And at that moment, he's like, you know what? I'm going to write my own stuff. And he wrote Yellowstone. And now he's like, oh my God, man, just crushing it. Like 1883 was good. Whew.
Yeah. That's what they say. I mean, like Tina Fey says the same thing. She's like, anybody that wants to get started in this business, you can't sit around and wait for somebody to give you a job. You got to go out and make it for yourself. And listen, that's not easy to do either. The fact that I wrote my very first feature by myself and it was like made and now coming out all within a year is unheard of. Like I'm so aware that like I fell under the luckiest stars in the world. And I mean, that's just an attribute to like the people that I've surrounded myself with and them making it happen, because I know plenty of people that have written scripts for the last 15 years that haven't made a single one yet. And they're all great. So yeah, I think you got to write your own stuff. If it gets made or not, that's not really even the point. I think it's just you're working towards something. And I think it's proactive. And I, again, think that if you're working on yourself and your craft and your career, I think good things will happen, whether it's indirectly or directly.
Absolutely. Yeah, that is really awesome. So do you know, I think it's Mattson Tomlin. Do you know that name?
I probably should.
Yeah, that's okay. He's like unheard of. And then he wrote Project Power, that movie with Jamie Foxx, and then wrote The Batman. And then like, I mean, just from nothing to like, he was like writing 10 scripts a year, and like a couple of them made it to the blacklist and nothing. And then overnight just absolutely blew up. Just really, really cool. So if you never made the decision to become an actor, do you think you'd still be doing programming? You think you would have started a bit? What do you think you'd be doing?
That's a great question. I mean, I would have, and this would have been a totally fine life too, but I probably would have gotten married already, and I probably would have had some kids. I most likely would have, I think I probably would have eventually started my own shop. I don't love having a boss. Right. I mean, I don't think anybody does, but yeah, I don't know. That's so hard to say. I also could have like died in a car accident.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I might not even be alive. So morbid, but yeah, I don't know. That's another one of those things. Like I try not to spend too much time thinking like, what if, just because I feel like, again, if I was unhappy right now, I see why people go back and think like, man, I wish I made different choices. But I am happy. And so that's why I don't spend too much time worrying about like, I wonder what a different life would have been.
Yeah. I won't ask you any more past questions. We'll just stick to the future. So my last few questions are just kind of some of the experiences that you've had, like what are some of your favorite experiences on set, some of your favorite projects that you've worked on? Like, I just would love to hear a couple stories that stand out for you.
Yeah. I mean, that's a hard thing. Like picking my favorites is so hard because I have such a good time on set every time I'm on set.
That's awesome.
I mean, obviously, like when I did a movie called LBJ that sadly nobody saw because it's actually a really good movie, but it's with Woody Harrelson and a bunch of other fantastic, like Jennifer Jason Leigh, Bill Pullman, Michael Mosley, Michael Scott David, and then Rob Reiner directed it.
Oh, so wow.
I was like, oh my gosh, like it's Woody Harrelson and Rob Reiner. Like this is incredible. And I was one of the leads in it. I shot in New Orleans for 5 weeks. So it was like such a wonderful experience, just, being flown somewhere. You go first class, like you're put up in this great hotel, you're making great money. And then it took so long for Woody Harrelson to get into the prosthetics that we never worked past lunch. So every day I got to go explore New Orleans. And then I made such like really good, like lifelong friends from that movie. And then I got to go to TIFF which is where we premiered in Toronto, and walking that red carpet was surreal.
Wow.
So that whole experience was so fun. The wind got a little taken out of my sails when the movie never really like did anything.
Right.
But still, like, the experience was so worth every second of it. And then I loved being on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I think Chloe Bennett's so cool. The whole show, like, I love the superhero world. I love Marvel. I've now worked on, I guess, 2 or 3 DC shows and 1 Marvel, because I did Lucifer, and then I also did Doom Patrol.
Oh, no way. I didn't know you did Lucifer.
Yeah, I was. I did 1 episode of Lucifer. I was a guest star. I was like trying to sell illegal meat, and I had my scene, which was so cool, because I became friends with Tom Ellis after. I actually kind of know Dennis too. We golf together sometimes. But my scene was with Chloe, Lucifer, God, and then Chloe's mom. And I was like, what a great scene to book. I was like, I get to be with like all of the heavy hitters, and we were in this restaurant in Hollywood called Tao. And it's this gigantic restaurant. So again, we had so many extras, and I was just sitting there remembering when I was the extra, thinking like, man, how did that guy get that job? Because that's so cool. And then I got to sit back and be like, I'm that guy with that job now. This is so cool. Also, still terrifying every time, because one of my lines was so hard to say. I had to say like, however you say raw panda in, I think it's like Ailaropida melanaluca tartar. And I was like, oh, I walked up to the table and I was like, I'm so sorry. I am going to mess up this line at least 5. And everybody was like, it's fine. We don't care. So yeah, you still get nervous, excited, which is so fun. I think the day I go on set and I'm not nervous, I'm probably going to be really worried, because I think that, anything that you're doing that's worthwhile, and anything that you're doing that you're really passionate about and you really love, should invoke some kind of anxiety or some kind of excitement.
Yeah, I have a question I've always wanted to know, especially with someone like where you're at. Like, is it like, did you just take acting classes for a while? Do you still continue? Like, how do you prepare for like harder and more difficult and more intense roles? Is acting like an ongoing like classroom style, or just like do you still have an acting coach, or is it just like environment only? I've always wondered that.
I think there's so many different ways to approach acting. I'm definitely not like a method, like a Jared Leto or like a Daniel Day-Lewis. I pretty much can like play myself in different circumstances. And I think that's what helps me and what gets me so many jobs, is I apply the given text to myself. Obviously, if there's specific characters or like notes or like thoughts that I'm supposed to be having as a character, then I apply those as well. But I do bounce back and forth between acting classes. I did study for a really long time with a bunch of different teachers until I found one that I really liked. And then I met this guy named John Rosenfeld, who has a studio in Los Angeles. And I really liked the way that he approached material and the way that he approached the business. But I think you're always learning and evolving. But I do think after you've been doing it, I mean, I've been doing it for 16 years. So usually, I get an audition and I'll read it. And now I kind of know like, okay, we're on, page 45 of this script. This is where we're at. This is what needs to happen, because this is where the story's going. So you do learn patterns. I mean, most movies are just different variations of other movies. The TV shows, like, it's funny, if you actually start really watching TV, you can see like very similar storylines within every show. And once you get into like the writing aspect of it, especially like the Lifetime movies, that like by page 5, this has to happen. And by page 12, like this has to happen. And it's really funny because you can see that there's a formula to it. Once you start to understand the formula, it's a lot easier to accomplish what it is that they need.
Gotcha. I think it's so cool that you're the Lifetime channel stud, that you get to act with all these like that's just so cool. Like my wife and her mom, bro, they'll watch Lifetime, every movie ever made, like during Christmas and the holidays and stuff like that. So believe me when I tell you, she's going to geek out when this movie that you just made releases.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Yeah, it's going to be super awesome. So, well, I don't have a ton of other questions. My last question really is just like, would you attribute any of your success to having great mentors? Like, what role has mentorship been in your journey?
Oh, I think, uh, like they always, I'm going to mess up the quote, but like they say that you are the five people, like your five closest people that you surround yourself by.
Yep.
Oddly, most of my friends are not in the entertainment business, but I just had such good role models. Like my parents were incredible people that were very driven, very successful, smart financially, and they just instilled my sister and I with such a good work ethic, like a respect for other people. And then I got really lucky when I came to Los Angeles. Like even Brian Herzlinger, I've known him for a little while now, but we became much closer recently. He was so instrumental in this whole thing with our movie. If I didn't have his mentorship, like it would have never happened. So I've got quite a few people like Jeremy Gordon, some of my first agents, some of my first managers, even people that I'm not necessarily working with anymore. I think if I didn't have the experiences I had with them, and if I didn't get to know them, and if I didn't learn from them, this would be impossible. There's no way. It's too hard of a business. It's too unpredictable, and there's just so much unknown, and it's so confusing, and it's so challenging that if you don't have the right guidance, you can either like go in a really bad direction that some actors do fall into, or you can just kind of get left behind, or you get so frustrated that you just quit. So I would attribute all of my success to, I guess we'll say 99% of it to other people surrounding me that inspired me to keep going and keep trying and helping me. And then obviously, me making the choice to continue on as well.
That's awesome. I have two final questions. First one, have to ask it because you were an LBJ. Man, is Woody Harrelson as cool in person as he seems like he is on film? Like, I love Woody Harrelson, man.
He's awesome. He's like one of those guys that he walks into a room and he just like commands attention. So you're like, I get it. I get why you're famous. He's also such a talented actor.
Wow.
He's a great guy. He's funny. He's charismatic. He's a little guarded, and I understand why. Like he's so famous that, we would go out to see a movie with him, and we'd be in public, and I would walk up to him, and at the beginning, you could tell he was a little bit like, "Oh, I don't know who this guy is," and then I'd be like, "Woody," like it's Brent, and he'd be like, "Oh, hey, what's up, man?" And it was so personable. But I get like why you got to have your guard up if you're at Woody Harrelson's level. But yeah, I have absolutely nothing bad to say about him. The guy was so professional. He knows all his lines. He shows up. He treats everybody on set equally. Like he's one of those people that, again, watching how he worked and watching how he presented himself was such a good learning lesson for me. Because then I was like, all right, if I ever get to that level, or when I get to that level, I got to keep in mind that this is how you treat people. Like this is how you keep respecting everybody else's time. You respect yourself and you respect the project. And it was, he's such a cool person.
That's awesome. My final question is just relaying around a topic that's really big right now. Like everybody's kind of talking about it, especially men right now. It's just mental health.
Yeah.
It's a big thing. Like and so I just want to ask you, like, there's probably no doubt that you're going to be like a big star, like big star here really, really, really soon.
Oh,
like what do you do for your mental health? Do you have anything, like, is it traveling to Big Bear? Is it fishing? Like what's kind of like your outlet when you're super stressed out or going through some stuff?
Honestly, I think the easiest answer is therapy. I think everybody at some point in their time, like whether it's ongoing or whether you just do like check-ins. I've gone to therapy on numerous occasions. I battled with skin cancer a lot. I went through terrible surgeries, like somewhere I had to take like 9 months off of work because they removed like my entire side of my face and then like pulled me back together. I've had bad breakups. I've had, lots of nothing that's like so like I always try to put things in perspective, and there are so many people that have gone through so many worse things than me, which I think I use to make sure I stay level-headed. But I think having good friends, good like support from your family, good people to bounce things off. If like you're going through something and somebody like a sounding board that can be like, hey, it's going to be okay. This is like, I've experienced that before. Here's how I got past it. But I also had like really bad anxiety for a long time about dying, which I'm sure was related to cancer.
Yeah.
that still creeps in from time to time. So I do think what I try to do is come up to Big Bear. I try to go fishing. For me, it's like camping, motorcycle rides, and like nature. That's where I think I reset, because it's a crazy world. I think social media, I try to limit my time on there because it's so wonderful that we can have such access to each other and like wealth of information. It gets dangerous with all the misinformation and then like
That's
all
right.
the bullying. So there's so many positives, but I think at the same time, it's so toxic, and it's the people that want to use it to just hurt you have so much more access, and it's so scary. So I try to limit that. And then I usually try to limit the amount of people that I talk to my problems about, because I just think that it's just not helpful for me personally. I try to find like a few people that I really trust and talk to them, and make sure you don't like let it bottle up inside, because I did that for a long time. And eventually it kind of spilled over. And that's when I first was like, I got to go to therapy to talk to somebody, just because I was so upset and like depressed and anxious. And thankfully everybody should do therapy at some point.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's probably one of the best things that you said in this entire interview is that, like there's nothing, like guys can be so hard-headed and full of ego. And it's just like, it's, you got to have an outlet, man. You can't just bottle it up for the rest of your life. Like,
well, it's tough where we're raised. I mean, it's not my parents' fault, but my dad wasn't, I mean, he is now, but he wasn't great with like verbal affirmations. Like he was, I was so embarrassed when I first went to therapy, and I was not going to tell my dad. And then somehow he told me that after his mom passed away, he went to therapy. And I was like, why didn't you tell me this sooner? Like I thought like I had to be this strong guy that like didn't have any feelings or emotions, and like I don't ever cry. And he was like, no, he's like, that's not it. It's not it at all. Like there's no shame in therapy. Like there's more shame in not going and asking for help. And I was like, that you just changed my entire outlook on like life and like mental health. I was like, thank you for telling me that. And I think that's important. And I don't know why people don't talk about it. Mental health is so important. Asking for help is not something to be ashamed of. Like we all go through struggles. We all have our problems. And that's why like we're not people that live alone. We have our community. We have our people to reach out to try to help. And you got to make sure that you're surrounding yourself with the right people.
Yeah. Tony Soprano made therapy cool for me. So yeah. So Brent, I just want to say thank you, man. This was a very helpful and a very awesome interview. I know everybody that's listening is going to be excited. So is it too early to tell everybody the name of the movie yet? Like, can we not do that yet? I don't want to ask you anything that you can't reveal, because I want everybody to.
I'm so confused about the name changes so frequently. I think it's already gone through 3 different names. So I don't even know if I'm allowed to say, but December 17th, it's going to be on Lifetime.
December 17th. I thought it was going to be called Christmas in July. I don't know why I heard that, but
I will say it used to be called You Might Be Right. The current working title, and hopefully I don't get in trouble, but it's called, right now it's called The Holiday Dating Guide. But awesome. The easiest way to find it for sure is I'm sure Lifetime will do a bunch of press. I also am going to post about it a ton on my Instagram, which is at Brent M. Bailey. I'm sure Maria Menounos will post a ton about it since she's in it. And then IMDb is always such an easy place to go. If you just type in Brent Bailey, you can figure out eventually what it's called. And currently on IMDb, it is called The Holiday Dating Guide.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. I can't wait to release this interview, and man, best of luck. And I have no doubt like you'll be in the MCU before too long. So thanks again for your time today.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. It was such a pleasure.
Absolutely.